Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry. In the last video, we got started with episode 5. Guys, we finally made it to the answer arcs. We're finally here. It didn't take me 100 videos, so will it really take us 200 videos to get through all of the episodes with Umineko? Remember, you could still place your bets. I don't really know when I'm supposed to be closing that off, but in the last video, we kind of got a weird start to things here. Battler didn't want to participate in this game, and then he decided that he'll participate in the game. The game was like already halfway over, or at least, you know, coming close to getting to a conclusion. The first Twilight had already happened. We saw those who died, which was actually a very interesting mix of characters. And we were also shown another character that we have not come across yet, but I do recognize. And then we jump to the beginning of this story, which is before the conference. We are getting pure confirmation that Kinzo has died. He has passed away before the conference has ever even began. And I believe what we're seeing here is Krauss coming up with a scheme for everybody to pretend as if Krauss is still alive. Or not Krauss, Kinzo is still alive. This is Krauss's idea. To give the two of them a chance to talk alone, Natsuhi told the servants not to tell anyone about Kinzo's death, and they left the room for the time being. Then she invited Krauss to her bedroom. I kind of forgot that the two of them sleep in completely separate rooms, and made him tell her everything about their current financial situation. These were things that Natsuhi had not been told about, under the assumption that a woman had no business knowing. Natsuhi had herself made a point of avoiding this area in the past, thinking that it wasn't a wife's place to intrude on such matters. However, this might also have meant that she had abandoned her duty as a wife to protect her family. The depths of this sin had been made quite clear to Natsuhi. Krauss was probably tired of trying to defend himself. Perhaps because he had gotten a headache, he hid his face and sank into silence. Natsuhi noticed that the water in the electric kettle was boiling and stood up to refill her cup with black tea. When she touched the cup of black tea, she noticed for the first time. The sound of the cup and saucer clinking together told her that her fingers were shaking. Krauss had built up a large debt to obtain funds for his various projects, and to cover the losses when they failed, and boy did they. It's like, come on, Krauss. Really? There were such huge red flags in those that you were talking with. Of course, he had put the mansion and property up as collateral. However, doing such a thing above board would result in the mortgage being registered. In other words, there would be a record that Krauss had put Kinzo's wealth up as collateral to obtain a loan without anyone's permission. Kinzo, Ava, and the others must not learn of such a thing. Therefore, Krauss had been putting those assets up as collateral using the worst possible method. Jesus Christ, dude. What Krauss was saying probably meant that he had, in essence, signed away the rights to his assets. If these assets had been used as collateral for a loan, then Krauss would still have some leeway under the law. He would have to deal with the bank, which would have absolutely no compassion, but they would be able to work something out within the rules set by society. However, signing away the deed and power of attorney, was a whole different story. In other words, even the mansion they were living in, if the person holding the deed were to decide to ignore his agreement with Krauss and sell the mansion to a third party right this moment, they would have no recourse whatsoever. Far from using collateral for a loan, this was basically the same as selling their house to borrow money. Wasn't there like a Family Guy episode about this?
つまり、後宮家の生殺与奪は金貸したちの手に委ねられていたわけですね。彼らがほんのわずかの気まぐれを起こして突然この家を売り払ったら、私たちは今すぐにも荷物をまとめ出て行かなくてはならないということですね。
理屈上はそうだ。だが 取引の相手はいずれも社会的信用のある人物ばかりだ。さら金じゃないぞ。経済人同士の信用取引だ。私も相手を信用している。相手だって私に金を貸すことで私が大きな事業を成功させ、投資した額が大きくなって帰ってくることを信用している。委任状を預けたのは私の誠意と事業の絶対の成功を疑わないからだ。ここで渋ったらどうなる？自分の事業に自分で自信が持てないことになるだろう。
If you were such a successful businessman, we wouldn't be in debt now, would we? Yeah, he is. Krauss has failed the most, I think, out of all the siblings in terms of business, solutions or directions that they all went in, because their goals were to make money, to be successful. Now, Eva and Hideyoshi, yeah, sure, they've got some stuff going on, and we've seen the same thing out of Rudolph and his business, and I don't really know what the fuck Rosa's up to, except for, not paying any attention to her daughter and also going on business trips away to escape her daughter and to fuck another guy. But, I think when it comes to these, business ventures, Krauss has really fucked up the most because of the decisions he made in turn. It wasn't just like, all right, I've got $100,000, I'm going to go do something good with it. No, he sank more money that he didn't actually have in order to do some crazy shit, and he sank other people's money also in the crossfire of all this. He actually took what he did not have to a whole new extent. It's insane how he was able to do all this. Natsu, he only barely stopped yourself from saying that. I would have fucking said it. Fuck this dude.
どうなりますか？あなたの借金が白日のもととなり、他の兄弟たちに咎められることになるわけですか？
Because, it's less putting, taking away from Kinzo what is rightfully his, but it's also putting people's lives on the line here. Their jobs, their home, their potential wealth, completely out of the picture if things go south, which, based on Krauss's history here, is very likely to happen. So, it's very frustrating to see that Krauss went this direction. It's pretty much as the siblings, predicted, that Krauss fucked up big time and that he's, pretending that Kinzo is still alive. They successfully predicted this shit.
刑事訴訟にも及ぶだろう。
刑事訴訟？どうしてですか？
君は知らない方がいい。
What the fuck does that mean, dude?
とにかく絶対にこのことを誰にも知られてはならぬと。
Oh, hold on there, Krauss. Hold on there. Hold on. So, yeah, I mean, does this also mean that the prediction was correct that he possibly killed Kinzo? Like, were they right on the money? Krauss looked at the floor shamefully, shaking his head over and over. Okay, less like actually killed him, but more like put him in a state where he wasn't going to be living too well. Basically, expedited his, oncoming death. Like, we all knew he was going to be dying soon. Wasn't taking care of the guy. If it would come to criminal charges, and he must have broken some laws, he's probably been so intent on raising a large sum of money that nothing had mattered to him but survival. Krauss had seriously believed that he would succeed with several businesses, and that he would definitely gain huge profits. So he had figured that even if he stepped over a few legal lines, he would be able to pay everything back before too long and pretend that the whole thing had never happened. This may gave Ben the factor that lessened his resistance towards breaking a couple of laws. And now Kinzo's death, the worst possible thing, had occurred, and they wouldn't be able to keep it all hidden for long. Okay, so it's not necessarily that he killed the guy, but more so, he's not doing the right things when it comes to the financial side of the world. There are laws to follow. Really, there's laws to follow with everything.
景気は今確実に上向いているんだ。私が都心で投資した不動産価値はみるみる上昇している。今それらを統合して 巨大ビジネスタワーを建設する計画が進んでいる。これは私のこれまでの投資の中で最も確実で最も大きな成功をしているものだ。
Well, given that your other investments haven't, done so well, a positive is going to be quite literally a positive. Even so, if you're still in the negatives, it's going to be a positive compared to the other ones.
ただ
If you
それは
lose less money
身を
than
つ
the
ける
other
まだ
times,
時間をかけ
basically.
る。絶対に確実だが今すぐというわけではないのだ。
その事業の成功は借金を返済するに足りるものですか？
もちろんだと思う。これまでの借金を全て帳消しにできる。だから信じてくれ。もう少しだけ時間が欲しいんだ。
I have no faith in this guy.
しかしお父様はもうお亡くなりになってしまいました。もうその時間はないのですよ。
分かっている。分かっているとも。だからどこかから金を調達して今すぐに借金を返さなくてはならない。とにかく金が必要なんだ。
Don't we all?
金が大量に今すぐ。
Don't we all?
うわーうわー
Yeah, okay, I don't know about all that. As Krauss roared and clutched at his head, he writhed about as if in pain. As she watched, several emotions swirled about in Natsuhi's chest. Her emotions conflicted as she felt pity for her husband while also feeling that he was a fool. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And she felt a mixture of resentment and regret towards her own irresponsibility in letting her husband run wild for so long. Even if this day had not come, it should have been clear that they were in a very critical situation. And yet he had carelessly waited for this moment to come and was now writhing about. Her husband was so foolish and so pitiful. It would be easy to let himself get fed up with this. However, she was his wife. No way. For a wife, ridiculing her husband as a fool would run in conflict with her responsibilities. If he was a fool, then she would have to support him enough to compensate. I wouldn't have. Shit, if I was in her shoes, I'd be dipping out, honestly. What an idiotic move, just continuing to support him. But that's love for you, or dedication, whatever you want to call it. However, she didn't have a clue of what she should do. Since there had been such a massive amount of money within arm's reach, it was only natural that Krauss had tried to dip his hands into it. It would also be easy to tell him to be a man and give up on all of it. But that would also run in conflict with her responsibilities. She was Ushiromiya Natsuhi, the woman who had become Krauss's wife and sworn to support him, the new head of the Ushiromiya family for her whole life. She had to somehow help her husband in his efforts to raise money. She understood it logically, but she couldn't suppress the indescribable dejection that seemed to rise up from the dark depths of her heart.
そうだ。親父の隠し黄金。10トンの黄金なら200億の価値がある。あれさえあれば。そうそう。あれさえ見つかれば万事は解決する。
And then some.
夏日、あれだ。魔女の碑文だ。あれを解こう。一緒に解こう。黄金さえ見つかれば万事解決なんだ。そうさ。この島のどこかに隠されてるはずなんだ。あれさえあれば。あれさえあれば。
一体あなたやめてください。
Krauss, acting as excited as he had thought up a perfect, brilliant plan, grasped Natsuhi's upper arms tightly. Natsuhi couldn't help but be dumbfounded. She wasn't just taken aback because she had heard him bring up something as fake-sounding as the hidden gold. This was Krauss, who usually mocked the story of the hidden gold, saying that it didn't exist and that it was all an illusion his father had created to borrow a lot of money. That was why Natsuhi was doubly taken back.
そうだ。ジェシカにも協力してもらおう。
Oh, jeez.
子供の感性でなら解けることもあるかもしれない。今は一家の一大事なんだ。みんなで協力し合わなくてはならない。そうだ。あんなの親父が作った気まぐれな謎なんだ。解けるはずさ。解けないはずがないんだ。それしかないんだ。ああ、夏日。本当によかった。まだ手は残っていたんだよ。 こんなに身近にこの島に黄金はある。それさえあれば万事解決なんだ。
What the fuck, dude?
夏日、ジェシカを呼ぶんだ。今すぐここに。家族の危機は家族で乗り越えよう。さあ早く。黄金はこの島にある。すぐ身近にあるんだ。
Unable to withstand the pain in the arm that he was twisting in his excitement, Natsuhi knocked Krauss aside. Krauss tripped over the edge of the bed and flopped over onto the floor.
いい加減にしてください。そしてどうか冷静になられてください。後宮家の一大事にそんな夢みたいなことを言い出してどうするというのですか。
I mean, it would be pretty cool. And very convenient.
夏日。
Though I guess this is a cool way of showing that, you know, we humans, we always put up an act, we always wear a mask and everything like that, but I mean, I've always seen Krauss as a bit of an idiot, along with, you know, some of the other siblings, if not all of them, in their own special ways, but, you know, now that we're behind the scenes, we're before the play has started, we get to see Krauss's true nature. He's terrified. He's thrown into a corner. He probably realizes very well that he's fucked up, but the only way that he thinks that he can solve this problem is by continuing down the road that he's continued to travel down all this time.
あなたもよく頭を冷やされて現実的な金策をお考えになってください。私も頭を冷やしてきます。
待ってくれ、夏日。
Though I do wonder, who puts Kinzo's body in the incinerator? Out of, you know, curiosity? Maybe he had come to his senses the instant he fell over. Krauss tried to tell Natsuhi to stop, but she just kept walking. You know, like, okay, we have Kinzo's death, you know, we have that going on, but who puts his body in there, you know? I wonder how that's all gonna go down. After closing the door forcefully, Natsuhi dashed away. But it's cool, you know, we're actually seeing, you know, how he died. It was just supposedly natural. However, the reason why that it's being covered up is now being put on display here. Natsuhi ran through the corridor. Oh, hello. Even though she didn't want anyone to see her like this, she ran headlong into Genji.
大変失礼いたしました。奥様、お怪我はございませんか？
私は大丈夫です。放っておきなさい。
かしこまりました。
現地、お父様の書斎はどうなっていますか？
そのままにしております。南條先生は客間におられますが。
そうですか。書斎の鍵は持っていますか？
はい、ございます。
お貸しなさい。しばらく私とお父様の二人きりにするように。もし主人に私のことを聞かれても知らないというのですよ。
かしこまりました。
Interesting. After grabbing the key to the study that Genji was holding out to her, Natsuhi rushed up the stairs. Now, there was the scene in episode 1 where I'm pretty sure Natsuhi went up to Kinzo's study and they had a conversation. I'm assuming that conversation didn't really happen. She then flew into the study, finally let out a wail and cried. I get why she chose that room, not necessarily to go talk with Kinzo. Nope, never mind. I guess she will do that, but also she wants to get away from everybody. Nobody is going to come into this room.
私と主人はお父様の築き上げてきたものを受け継ぐことができます。
Ain't that the truth?
罪深く愚かな私たちをどうかお許しください。そしてもしお許しいただけるならばどうか愚かな私たちをお導きください。
Clinging to Kinzo as he slept in the bed, Natsuhi cried even harder. She kept imagining Kinzo sitting up suddenly and patting her head. No, father isn't the type of person to pamper. More likely he would yell at me to stop being so noisy. I know I would. No, I'm just kidding. However, neither of these imaginations came true. because it was an undeniable fact that Kinzo had entered an eternal sleep. But even so, Natsuhi begged the sleeping Kinzo to forgive and help them. It was still only a few hours after his passing. Perhaps his soul was still here listening to her. Believing this, Natsuhi begged for Kinzo's forgiveness and help even more earnestly. Oh shit. Now she's imagining things. That voice made Natsuhi jump up in surprise. And so he rises, and so he does. What, did he just stop his heart for a few hours or some shit? When she faced in the direction that the voice had come from, she saw Kinzo sitting at the study desk, folding up his reading glasses. Okay, yeah, it's very obvious that she's just imagining this.
お父様。
なんというみそぼらしい顔か。顔を洗え。仮にも後ろ宮家次期当主の妻ではないか。そんな情けない面を使用人に見せてはならぬぞ。
はい、お父様。失礼しました。
Natsuhi understood. This was just an illusion, one that Natsuhi had created out of her desire to speak with a memory of Kinzo as he once was. No, that wasn't it. She believed that just for now, Kinzo's soul had shown itself to her. She was sure that doubting this would cause it to vanish in an instant.
当主の座が継承されたと同時に早速厄介事が起きたようだな。
はい、夫を支えることができませんでした。本当に申し訳ありません。
つくづく後宮家は呪われている。私が当主を継承した時もそれはひどいものだった。お前たちの苦難などまだまだ可愛いものだ。
Kinzo's succession to the family headship had come suddenly. At the time, he had been nothing more than a single young man from a branch family, far separated from the Ushiromiya main family. The main family might have had honor and tradition, but Kinzo had had nothing to do with that. Then the principal members of the main family were wiped out in the Great Kanto earthquake, along with their businesses. On top of that, there had been a complicated antagonism between the members of the family at the time, and the elders had all tried to impose their will on the others in that sinking ship. Because of this, they weren't even able to elect a leader to revive the Ushiromiya family. They then found a common ground and selected Kinzo, a youth with absolutely no ties to any of the opposing elders, to be the head. So the elders hadn't really entrusted Kinzo with the rebuilding of the Ushiromiya family. Kinzo had been nothing more than their puppet, with his arms and legs pulled in opposite directions.
はい、お父様の苦難の日々はよく存じております。
そして戦争が始まった。当時の私はもう生きていくことに疲れ果てていた。戦場で死ねればと願ったが、前線には送られなかった。しかし、日に日に戦況が悪化し、本土決戦の時が近づいてきていた。私は不謹慎にもその日が早くやってくることを願っていた。
After listening to the approaching footsteps of that Reaper day in and out, it is said that Kinzo started cutting his ties with this world one by one. And then, on that day when he had severed all of his regrets, when he reached a state of enlightenment, it is said that he had a mystical experience. It is said that he met her, the Golden Witch Beatrice.
私は魔女と契約を交わし、黄金と狂気の力を与えられた。
You sure you weren't like straight up high on some crazy ass drug and you just like I don't know, had a really good conversation with somebody else and they gave you a whole bunch of money?
その日を境に古き私は死に狂気の魔力を得た新しき私が誕生したのだ。
There's various drugs back in the day, like
存じて
you'd
おり
be
ます。
seeing shit, you'd be experiencing shit.
そして戦後
Not that I would know.
お父様は天才的辣腕にて後宮家を復興させるのです。
The now deceased elders, who knew Kinzo at the time, had whispered to each other that Kinzo must have bumped his head on the battlefield and returned with a different personality. That was just how much Kinzo had stood out after the war. Whether the story about Kinzo meeting a witch was true or not, there could be no doubt that the extraordinary experience of war had prepared him for death and let him reach a state of enlightenment. If you wanted to describe the mystical experience following all of that as a meeting with the witch, that claim certainly shouldn't be dismissed out of hand.
そうですね。お父様は戦争からお帰りになり、魔女ベアトリーチェを従え、真の意味での後宮家当主となられたのです。
そうだ、ベアトリーチェに出会う以前の私は当主と呼ばれるだけの人形に過ぎ、私は黄金の魔女を従えて初めて当主たり得たのだ。
お父様、その黄金の魔女は新しき当主である夫クラウスには力を貸してくださらないのでしょうか。
貸すであろうな。
Hell no, she won't.
真に当主を継承したならば。
真に継承するとはどういう意味ですか。
真の意味で後宮家の当主としての責任と誇りを持てるかどうかということだ。
Yeah, he's nowhere near that. He's absolutely not at that
お
point.
前ならば分かっているはず。当主とは血で継承されるものではない。魂と信念によって継承されるのだ。クラウスが我が長男であっても、それがなくては真の当主とは呼べない。そしてそれが心に宿されていたなら、その人間はたとえクラウスでなくとも立派な新しき当主である。黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェはその真の当主に力を貸すであろう。そうであるな、ベアトリーチェ。
Damn. Natsuhi's really going through all the illusions here. When Kinzo called the witch's name, gold butterflies seethed out of every corner of the room. This fantastical scene had an otherworldly beauty to it. It was like standing in the midst of a blizzard of golden flower petals being blown about a rose garden of gold. As Natsuhi stared at this scene in shock, the gold butterflies gathered and formed a human shape. Then the witch of the portrait appeared.
いかにもわらわこそが後宮家顧問錬金術師黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェである。わらわは奔放にして自由、誰の命令も聞かぬ。
それを世界でたった一人、私だけが支配した。だからこそ後宮家の当主たり得るのだ。
その傲慢さこそが後宮家当主の資格だというか。
傲慢とはすなわち自信であり勇気である。そしてそれに見合う力を得ようとする悪なき向上心の表れである。だからこそ私はお前を支配した。
傲慢を語る男がそれを実現していく様を見るのは心地よいものだ。不言実行は強運なる者の言い訳に過ぎぬ。真の王者は持たぬ者さえも語る。そしてその傲慢を確かに実現してみせるのだ。わらわを支配できる者にはその王者の傲慢が必要だ。
わかるか、夏日よ。
I know I don't.
真の王者はあらゆる苦難を恐れぬ。必ず乗り越えられると公言する。その算段がなくともだ。だから弱者は希望を持つ。 集い崇め協力を誓う。そこに力が生まれ、有言は実行されるのだ。それを心に刻め。
はい、お父様。
Natsuhi understood. Through this mystical experience, Kinzo was telling her how to prepare herself to overcome hardship, even after his own death. Feeling a warm sensation rise up in her chest, she let the valuable words Kinzo had given her echo through her mind over and over. A true monarch. In other words, the true head of the Ushiromiya family must not fear hardship. That's literally what he just said. Such a person must believe they can overcome any hardship. If they can't even believe it about themselves, well, then they'll have no chance of overcoming their challenges. She suddenly felt very ashamed of the way that she had entered this room, sobbing and asking Kinzo of what to do.
私は愚かでした。後宮家の一大事に泣き言を言う暇などあるわけもありません。そしてお父様から後宮家を引き継いだ以上、私たちは何があってもその名誉を守り抜きます。
ほう、どうやってクラウスの借金を返済するか、その青写真も描けぬのにか。
Beatrice laughed unpleasantly. No, that wasn't it. She was testing Natsuhi to see whether she possessed the mental readiness to be a true monarch. Natsuhi wasn't confused anymore. She answered clearly, gazing into Beatrice's eyes.
はい、今はどうすればいいのか、その方法をまだ見つけることはできません。しかし、私の夫は新しき後宮家の当主であり、私はそれを支える妻です。ですから、夫に代わり、私が宣言します。
聞こ
う。後宮クラウスと夏日は必ずやこの苦難を乗り越え、後宮家の名誉を守ってみせます。お父様にご心配をおかけすることはありません。
No, actually, you have a lot to worry about, especially given Krauss's track record.
惨憺たる状況については知っておる
が。はい、この屋敷さえも明日には立ち退けと命じられても拒めぬという最悪の状況です。遺産分配となれば親族たちに刑事告発さえされるかもしれません。しかし心配には及びません。そうなる前に借金をすべて返済し、名誉を取り戻します。
As she stood at attention with a resolute attitude, Natsuhi proclaimed this clearly with Ushiromiya, Kinzo, and Beatrice as witnesses. Allegedly, for a while, they remained silent as though weighing Natsuhi's resolve. Then Kinzo chuckled and turned away.
おし、なぜにこやつが我が息子ではなかったのか。
その資質を持つ女を息子がめとったことさえ、これもまたそなたの強運よ。
ベアトリーチ、私の最後の命令だ。
当主でないそなたの命令をもはや聞く義理はないぞ。
ほう、ならば新しき後宮家当主の命令に従え。
そなたはすでに当主でなく、クラウスは未だ当主ではない。わらわは誰に仕えよというのか。
お前にそれを委ねる。後宮家の当主を受け継ぐ資格があるかどうか、そして片翼のわしの紋章を背負うにふさわしいかどうか、お前が確かめるのだ。
断るぞ。当主でなき男の命令など聞けぬわ。
いや違うぞ。これは遺言である。当主が残したお前への最後の命令である。
ならば従わぬわけにはいかぬか。わらわもつくづく付き合いがよい。
違うな。
ほう、
興味を持ったからであろうが。
つくづくそなたには隠し事ができんな。
夏日。
はい、お父様。
乗り越えてみよう。
はい。
That might have seemed like a mere response to Natsuhi, but to Kinzo and Beatrice, it seemed to be something of much greater significance. Beatrice nodded deeply. and with a motion of as elegant as her dress, she bowed deeply before Natsuhi.
後ろ宮家顧問錬金術師黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェ後ろ宮家の苦難を再び乗り越えるためそなたの力となろうぞ
You're gonna give us some gold?
ありがとう。あなたの力が必要です。私たちは必ずこの苦難を乗り越えます。
そのために助力は惜しまぬが先に断らねばならぬ。かつて金蔵の窮地を救ったようにそなたに再び莫大な黄金を与えればこの度の苦難は解決することは分かっている。
No, that is literally what I actually just jokingly said.
しかしそれはできぬのだ。
そうですか。
すまんな、夏日。ベアトリーチェの黄金は私一代限りという契約なのだ。そしてそれを受け継ぐためには魔女の碑文を解かねばならぬのが取り決め。
黄金は碑文にて封じられている。だからそれを解けぬ限りそなたに黄金の魔法は与えられぬ。
わかりました。ならば他の方法でこの窮地を脱する方法を模索しましょう。
Or, solve the epitaph and there you go, you got a bunch of gold.
主人は時間をかけるとは言っていますが必ず借金は返済できると言っています。そのための時間を得ることができればこの苦難は乗り越えられます。
よいぞ夏日、続けよ。
しかし金蔵はもう死んでいるぞ。医者と使用人は葬儀の準備。そなたは親族たちにその連絡だ。そなたは自らその金策の猶予時間を終わらせる宣言をすることになる。自ら刃を下ろす断頭台も愉快なものよ。
Startled, Natsuhi looked up at the ceiling. There wasn't actually anything there, but even so, Natsuhi had found something.
降りたか、魔力が。
夏日、決まったか。わらわに望む奇跡の魔法が。
Well, what do we got? Or do we not get to know? I don't think we get to know. Once again, all of those who had witnessed Kinzo's corpse were gathered in the study. Krauss was still impatient and clutching at his head. Genji was as expressionless as ever. Nanjo and Kumasawa wore bewildered expressions on their faces. But in stark contrast to all of them, Natsuhi wore a resolute expression.
あなたにもう一度お尋ねします。金策は間違いないのですね。
1年いやせめて半年あれば必ず見れる計画なんだ。しかし今すぐにはどうしても無理なんだ。
ならばそれを待ちましょう。
しかしお前も言ったぞ。親父はもう死んでしまった。
お父様はお亡くなりになどなっていませんよ。まだこうしてご健在であられます。
When Natsuhi said this, everyone jumped and looked up, because they instantly understood what those words meant. However, Krauss alone didn't get it right away and asked her,
それはどういう意味だね。親父はもう現にそこに。
繰り返します。お父様は未だにご健在であられます。ご自身の研究がお忙しいので、これまで以上に書斎を出ることはできません。
Yep, here we go.
ですから私たちは、お父様が研究に専念できるように、外務をすべて執り行い、お父様に不要なお仕事が及ばないようにしなくてはなりません。つまりそれは、これまでと何ら変わらないということ、理解できていますね、源氏。
はい、片翼のわしの家具はこれからも親方様にお仕えいたします。
熊沢、そして南條先生、私の話は理解できましたね。
Poor woman.
それでいいのかね、夏日さん。
お父様は確かに今日お亡くなりになったかもしれません。 しかし今この場にいる私たち全員が信じることでお父様を蘇らせる魔法を使うことができます。
無理ですよ奥様。そんないくらなんでも。
解剖すれば死亡時期を特定される。不審がられることは避けられん。
お父様はお亡くなりにならないのですから解剖などされる言われはありませんよ。
Of course, she wasn't planning to make it seem like Kinzo would live forever. The fake life given to Kinzo would only last until Krauss could repay his debts. After that, Kinzo's soul would finally be able to rest in peace. Najo repeatedly said that the time of death would be discovered during the autopsy, but Natsuhi kept saying that this wouldn't be a problem.
お父様は死亡届によってお亡くなりになるのではありません。
そうか。失踪届か。
Ah, jeez. After clapping his hands together, Krauss stood up, shaking his fists.
そうです。借金が無事に返済でき、お父様にお休みいただける準備が整ったなら、その時にお父様の失踪を宣言します。
Rokkenjima's vast, uncultivated forest was the perfect place to stage a disappearance. One day, Kinzo would go out to the forest for a walk and never return. They would search for him without success, and then be forced to report his disappearance.
失踪なら死体がなくても死亡届を出せる。
Okay, so we gotta think about morals here, right? You know, this is very unethical, what they're doing. It's also very illegal, what they're doing, I'm pretty sure.
つまり死亡時期を隠せるということだ。どうだ、南條先生。これなら何の問題もない。
確かにそういうことにはなりますが。
Nanjo, why are you going with this man?
それで良いのですか奥様。確かに私たちが黙っていれば親方様がお亡くなりになられたのは秘密にできるかもしれません。ですがどこでどう間違って誰かに知られないとも。
熊沢、声が大きいです。お父様はあちらでお休み中なのですよ。起こしてしまわれるつもりですか？
It isn't a corpse. Kinzo is sleeping. As Natsuhi said that, Kinzo lay quietly on the bed as though there was nothing at all odd about her words. I don't know how I feel about all this, man. This is kind of fucky. Alright, what's going on here? Are we going forward in time?
さあさあ思い出してごらんなさい。
Well, I don't know what's going on actually here.
そなたがどんな姿をしていたのか、そなたがどんな日々を謳歌していたのか。
Or is this Kinzo coming back to life here? Once again, a storm of gold butterflies started to swirl, covering Kinzo's cold body. Then, after the butterflies exploded into fine gold powder and disappeared, just like those fairy tales that have been told over and over since long ago, Kinzo slowly opened his eyes and sat up.
お父様。
夏日、先に我が名誉のために断っておくぞ。私は生への執着からそなたにこれをそそのかしたのではない。
嘘つきめ、多少は予見していたであろうが。どうだ金蔵、体の方は。
悪くはないが、どこか夢の中のような感じだ。重みがないな。
この世にとどまることを許されぬ存在が未だとどまっているのだ。多少の不自由は諦めよ。
お体は本当に大丈夫なのですか？
Probably not.
本当に大丈夫なのですか？
むしろ心地よいくらいだ。これが死後の世界の感覚ならば、幽霊気取りも捨てたものではないぞ。
これにてどうか、夏日、金蔵はよみがえった。故に葬儀は不要。そなたの苦難はこれにて解決だ。
ベアトリーチェ。
As Natsuhi tried to find words of gratitude amidst her confession, Beatrice waggled her pointer finger and spoke.
感 感謝の言葉はいらぬぞ。支配者は傲慢であればよい。わらわは頼みは聞かぬが、命令には従うのでな。
それでも言います。ありがとう。これで主人のために時間が稼げます。あとは私たちの仕事です。
しかし夏日、確かに金蔵は蘇ったが、それは永遠ではない。我が魔力が続く限りである。半魔法の毒素により魔法は破られてしまうかもしれぬことを心せよ。魔法の断りを正しく理解し、その維持に努めよ。わらわはそなたに奇跡を見せるが、それをつかみとどめるのはそなたの
Basically,
役目だ。
uphold the idea, and everybody has to uphold the idea that Kinzo was not dead, like she was just preaching. That they just have to continue to try to perceive Kinzo as alive, so then the global perception will be that he is indeed alive.
無論です。
I mean, it's the whole shtick that we've been getting this entire time. That's like the big theme here.
あなたにもらったこの奇跡を
Believe it, and then
私
you'll
たち
see
は
it.
決しておろそかにしません。
Instead of seeing it is to believe it or whatever.
それでなるほどな。主と畳は新しい方がいいというのは本当らしい。気に入った。わらわはそなたに仕えようぞ。後宮夏日。我こそは後宮家顧問錬金術師。
Oh
黄
boy.
金の魔女ベア。いつでも我が名を呼ぶがいい。さすれば現れ、わらわはそなたに奇跡を授けるであろう。
Looks like the spotlight is on Natsuhi once again.
私は後宮夏日、あなたを刺激し、後宮家の名誉を守ります。
I mean, it's not like she's going to become Natsuhi Beatrice, because if that's the case, I just need to fucking close the game now. Let's not go down that route. Or at least I really don't want to. October 5th, 1985, the family conference of the previous year. Here we go. Minus 1 year, that is. But I do wonder, what do we have going on here? I guess we'll find out in the next video. This seems like a pretty alright spot to wrap things up, if I do say so myself. Alrighty. So I guess we're playing pretend here, just like I predicted. But, man, I don't know how I feel about it. I really don't. It's such an odd feeling that the servants, Nanjo, Krauss, and Natsuhi are most likely always going in with the idea that they're fully aware that Kinzo is dead. That is a predetermined thing that has happened before the game is even set up, technically, I guess you could say. Unless we're starting the game early. I don't even know what it means for the game to start and end, but whatever. How I'm interpreting things are Kinzo is for sure dead, and anything that we see of him is just that character's perception of him being alive based on what others have been saying. Let's roll with that. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.